The Twitter files exposed just how deeply the corrupt tentacles of the FBI were embedded within the social media website, collaborating with neutered little soft-hand transsexual nerds in senior executive positions, desperately demanding censorship of certain political posts, accounts, and stories, and even paying the company for the privilege. Obviously doing anything and everything they can and could to stop the Donald and the MAGA movement overall. The efforts are clearly in defiance of the First Amendment and utterly in opposition to our founders' vision of the country and the federal government. And Twitter, of course, is hardly alone. Now are they? Because the real cesspool is right here on YouTube. Now isn't it? My apologies to those who are listening to this on Bitchute and Rumble. Alan McLeod, senior staff writer at Mint Press News, has been writing about the stunning number of ex-intelligence officers working in Twitter, TikTok, and Meta, parent of Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. While his article, quote, "Meet the ex-CIA agents deciding Facebook's content policy" dropped in July, it's worth a revisit for sure. Mint Press has found that Facebook has recruited dozens of individuals from the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, as well as many more from other agencies like the FBI and Department of Defense. These hires are primarily in highly politically sensitive sectors such as trust, security, and content moderation, to the point where some might feel it becomes difficult to see where the U.S. national security state ends and Facebook actually begins. In previous investigations, this author has detailed how TikTok is flooded with NATO officials, how former FBI agents abound at Twitter, and how Reddit is led by a former war planner for the NATO think tank, the Atlantic Council. But really, the sheer scale of infiltration of Facebook blows these away. Facebook, in short, is utterly swarming with spooks. Alan tweeted out back on July 12th, "Studying various employment websites, it's clear Facebook is actively recruiting directly from the CIA to fill some of its most politically sensitive positions regarding content moderation, allowing them to wield considerable influence over the biggest media/news platform in history." So the Daily Mail on Thursday decided to track down some of the former intel folks Alan has been writing about, and what they discovered is astonishing. Here are a few of Meta's employees. Aaron Berman left his job as a senior analytic manager at the CIA in July of 2019 to become a senior policy manager for misinformation at Meta. Now, Deborah Berman spent a decade working as a data intelligence analyst at the CIA before she was brought on to Meta's trust and safety management. Chris Rose has held a number of positions in the intelligence community before he joined Meta's oversight board in March of 2020. Now, Brian Weisbard, he's a former CIA intelligence officer who is now employed as Director of Trust, Safety, Security, and Data Privacy. Now, Scott Stern, on the other hand, he was a CIA targeting officer. He's now working happily as a senior manager of risk intelligence. And lastly, Mike Torrey left his position as a senior analyst at the CIA in September of 2018 to become the Secretary Engineer Investigator for Threat Analysis. Wow, what a title. You know what they say, the longer the title, the littler the... You get my point. This is incredible, folks. This list goes on and on and on, but you get the idea. Here's another tweet from Alan back in July. You'd never guess from this official Facebook video that this lovely guy was, until a couple of years ago, one of the most senior people at the CIA. Now he's deciding what we all see and don't see on Facebook. But I guess some might ask, why is this even a problem? Shouldn't we want experts and information to be leading misinformation efforts at social media companies to thwart big bad guys like North Korea and Russia? Well, Alan has an answer for that. He says, quote, "The problem is that having so many former CIA employees running the world's most important information and news platforms is only one small step removed from the agency itself deciding what you see and what we don't see online, and all with essentially no public oversight. If you question social media censorship in the last few years, especially since Donald Trump's victory in 2016, you were called a conspiracy theorist or a tinfoil hat lunatic, as novelist Joseph Heller famously wrote in Catch-22. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you. Oh, and might I add, just because they keep telling you that the government is not actively engaged in online censorship doesn't mean they aren't. So in conclusion, before I have Glenn Greenwald go to town, the Twitter files have decisively proven that intelligence agencies are censoring regular American citizens 24 hours a day. And the makeup of Meta's staff clearly indicates that Facebook, well, it's completely chock full of CIA shenanigans. Now let's just wait and see what we can find out about Google and, of course, YouTube.
So let me start by asking you, you've obviously been an extremely busy journalist over the past 7 days. You've reported on an enormous amount of information. I know from having been involved in stories where that happens, that I always like being asked by journalists, what are the 2 or 3 most significant revelations you were able to report? Because sometimes it is hard for the public to process so much information. So let me begin by asking you that question. What do you consider to be the top 3, say, revelations of what you've shown?
Well, number one for me definitely is, the first time that we saw emails that said concretely, or not even emails, Slacks, that said the FBI flagged this for us, the DHS flagged this for us, and we were able to follow the thread of, basically requests for moderation from the government and seeing how that process worked on the back end. We're still working out the whole mechanics of it, but basically the fact that the government is now provably in the business of monitoring speech at a pretty micro level and flagging it for moderation, I think that's the biggest news that we've broken so far. There's obviously other stuff in there, and we're starting to get the outlines of some things that are really interesting. Also, I would say the thing that Barry covered on day 2.
You're talking about Barry Weiss, the other reporter who reported the story.
Yeah, Barry Weiss. The second installment of the Twitter files was about what most people would call shadow banning, what they call visibility filtering, which we've learned a lot about. And she published, among other things, a big screenshot of an account that just has a notation on it that says trends blacklist, right? So you can see that they had an enormous range they have basically total ability to control how visible one person or one account is versus another. And so they can no longer say they don't do that.
I want to focus on the first part of that answer for just a second, because if I had to name the most significant revelation, I would also name that one, namely the very direct, ongoing, and regular participation of the U.S. security state in this process of having private companies decide what information we get. Shortly before you began doing this reporting, Ken Klippenstein and Li Feng got a hold of documents at The Intercept showing that Homeland Security has a major plan, much of which they've implemented, to insinuate themselves into that process. And now you're being able to show that not only is there this open communication, but you also were able to show that Yoel Roth, one of the chief censors at Twitter, was almost gleeful about how frequently he was meeting with representatives of the FBI and Homeland Security. Why do you consider that so significant? Why should people care about that?
Because it had only been speculated about before. What we're seeing, and there's a huge difference between, let's say, the FBI meeting regularly with the head of trust and safety at Twitter and making recommendations in a general way. There's a big difference between that and what is actually happening, which is this huge in bulk operation of reports that are coming from a number of agencies asking for things to, well, they're not, we don't know how the ask works yet, but they're definitely flagging things for moderation, and we're seeing how that works. So rather than it being speculative now, we now know the government is in the business of mass censoring, essentially.
Most of this came by way of redstate.com. If you liked it, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. Leave a comment down below. There's a PayPal link in the description box, so please put $1 in the bucket on the way out the door. I'd like to thank everyone for all your donations. They're much needed and much appreciated. Now, with all that being said, we'll see you next time.
Come on, move! Move! Easy, easy.